good afternoon, everyone. My name's Leslie Casson-Stevens, and I'm with SAP. I work with our customers in the federal government space. And today, what we have an hour to spend some time instead of just sitting and taking information in like we've all been doing all morning. The idea is to actually generate some real conversation among the folks in the room. And so I am looking forward to hearing what's going on in your part of the world and how it interacts with AI. We will pass as people want to speak, please we'll pass a microphone to you so that their recording can be audible. So just some quick thoughts to get us started. I think all across government and industry, right, we have everybody facing times of maybe budget contraction, a lot of uncertainty, waves of staff losses due to normal retirements, due to layoffs, some expected, some not, and you still have the job to do. And hopefully AI can become a tool to help us all get through this phase and set us up for the future. So as I was listening this morning, a couple things came to mind that I'll just toss out there for what it's worth. A number of years ago, probably 10 or more years ago, I read a book that was suggested by the superintendent of my children's school system. He wanted the whole community to read it. And it was a book by a business writer who's here local in the DC area named Daniel Pink. And this book was called A Whole New Mind. And what he was researching and talking about is what is the skill set for the 21st century going to look like? And his premise was that anything that could be, any work that could be defined into a rule set or a decision tree would be automated or offshored. So he was thinking about the United States, right, and the workforce in the United States. So I think we're seeing today what he was talking about in that book. But he also identified what he thought some of the key skill sets would be for the worker in the 21st century information age in the US. So I recommend it to you. It's an entertaining read, insightful read, but I think that underlies some of the conversation that we had this morning or heard this morning about how organizations are trying to introduce these tools into the workforce and how best to use our human resources as we do that. So anyway, why don't we just spend a minute and I'll let you guys chime in. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts or your actual experiences on how AI can play a role in aiding with reorganization and standardization that may be required to consolidate functions. So in the federal space, for those of you in the federal space, there's been a big initiative that's ongoing now to consolidate functions that might exist in multiple organizations inside a larger organization. So as an example, procurement, right, where I may have procurement pockets, many places they're being asked to consolidate. So there's a lot of reorganization, and that requires standardization, right? When you consolidate to a shared service, you can't have everybody have their own special practices. So anybody care to talk about how AI may be playing a role? Yep.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, like within larger organizations, there are silos, the same function being performed in multiple areas. That's exactly what our organization is going through, trying to consolidate under a single umbrella the various silos around the organization. Especially, I mean, that's for efficiency of operations and consolidating. Again, you might not need that many staff performing the same, duplicative functions. AI certainly would be a great help, although we are not in the AI area at that level where we could really tap into the potential and utilize that. However, in some of our research and how we are getting this organization, the reorganization together, we are tapping into the various AI tools, ChatGPT and Copilot and various things that we might need to consolidate and come up with our organization plan and what would work. So yeah, we are basically as an assistant to help us with that reorganization and making sure that we are doing it in a very efficient manner. So the outcome needs to be what we are envisioning, whereas, again, efficiency of operations, fewer staff, and making sure that we are getting the output, the services that we provide to our customers, that need is met.
Would you care to share any specific examples? I'm always a person who understands better when you give me an example of some of the ways you're seeing applicability.
Can you mention what organization you're with, please?
Department of Veterans Affairs. Yeah. Although I can't share specifics at this point, like I said, it's, the use of AI is at a very rudimentary level right now. We are not that advanced where, we are really utilizing it to the fullest level. However, in an assistant capacity, yes, we are utilizing it for the purpose of reorganization. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I represent, I've been legal counsel for municipalities for 30 years, and I'm actually, in one of my roles, I'm Chief AI Officer for a Pennsylvania county. And I could tell you, I think, especially government entities that are so used to local government entities that are so afraid of being behind that they are running headfirst into a brick wall with AI. I think it's really important to kind of put the brakes on a little bit, make sure you get ready for it and understand what it could do, what it can't do. What I have done is I'm separating consideration of these different AI solutions into Gen AI like Copilot and ChatGPT and everything else. So, generative AI, Copilot, I'm aware of what the risks are. I could identify the risks and mitigate the risks, and most of those risks relate to misuse or misunderstanding of the tools by your staff. It could have to do with not having data silos set up correctly or having your Copilot set up in a way that honors your tenant or your on your government cloud. You could mitigate so many of the risks of use of those type of tools by adequate training of your staff. The other AI solutions are much more insidious, and I think they're much more dangerous because many of them are black boxes. Every solution is being sold with the tag that says AI driven. The problem is there is no sort of single standard that these solutions are required to meet to make sure that the results of these models, the outputs of these models, comply with civil rights laws, comply with not having results that have a disparate impact on people because of race, creed, color, national origin, or any other protected classes. I mean, I'm talking about solutions like scanning technology that will scan facial recognition, Even scanners that will scan for weapons could produce a biased result that has a disparate impact on those classes. Some of the solutions that I've had vendors try to sell to me have to do with identification of families that are at risk for abuse, and those solutions don't have any sort of objective data behind them to show me that they're not producing an output that is biased. And those are the dangerous ones. Those are the ones that the ACLU will jump on. Those are the ones that the U.S. Attorney at some point, if you're having that type of impact on certain classes of citizens, those are the ones that are going to get you in trouble. And if you go to the AI incident database, it's replete with examples of government entities that have jumped headfirst into some of these different, predictive models that that resulted in very serious, catastrophic consequences to innocent people. Michigan instituted a solution that was supposed to identify fraud, and by the time, because of the scale that they operate these systems on, by the time it was discovered that this was producing false positives, false hits for fraud, it was too late. I mean, it had already impacted many families. It resulted in a $20 million class action suit. It resulted in 80% of the hits that this software showed up as fraud were wrong, which you could flip a coin and be more accurate than that. There was a system that was used to identify, to give information to judges about the likelihood of recidivism by offenders, and that was found to be racially biased and have a negative impact because of race. So, as far as adoption by government entities, and I would apply the same to even any business clients, these solutions may work, but they only work till you discover that they didn't work. And it requires a level of expertise and that individual companies, individual government entities probably do not have. It requires analysis that many entities do not have the ability to do. And I think the next step has to be, just like you have ISO 9000 certification for certain type of systems, it's an objective certification that you could get as long as you meet certain standards. I really believe we have to get to the point where these models are subjected to that kind of rigor before they're put out in working. But the Gen AI, I really believe, you could train staff and mitigate much of the damage. I don't see it replacing jobs. I do see it, and I've experienced it myself, that it makes workers work more efficiently, and if that results in some sort of a loss of jobs, it's not going to be to the extent of replacing workers. And all the things you read about tech companies laying off coders because of Gen AI, that's just misinformation, because I code with Gen AI, and I'll tell you, you have to know how to code in order to use Gen AI to help you code. And if you don't, it's going to produce garbage. So that's my 2 cents.
Pass that back. Thank you. My arm needs to grow longer. Thanks. Yeah, I want to kind of continue the conversation which the gentleman started. I'm actually a vendor in explainability and of AI and governance of AI. I also worked at a lot of corporations, including Capital One. So I come from a background where regulation, and I come from highly regulated industry like financial services. You're absolutely right. There are hallucinations in Gen AI which can be certainly managed with retrieval augmented generation, prompt engineering. but they're also in traditional AI, in prediction models, especially prediction and cognition. You have a lot of false positives, and fraud is an area where you have to explain the outcome. Once you explain the outcome, what happens is you can feed it to the reviewer, investigator, and let them look at it before actually claiming that it's a fraud, right? So those kind of safeguards, guardrails, along with software which can explain what is happening inside the black box, that seems to be helping. Now we are getting into agentic AI, which is kind of, I would think, one step above the prediction, forecasting, all those things. So we have to really, build guardrails for that. So I wholeheartedly agree with you on that. There is some effort going on in terms of explainability, interpretability, machine learning, deep learning models, but these models are complicated. The math behind them is complicated, right? Definitely different types of controls need to be put in place. Prompt engineering, RAG, that's one way of controlling, looking at the output and making sure that output doesn't have errors. But you can have guardrails by design. But one thing I'm seeing now is that what you exactly said, you need to put these guardrails from the onset of building these AI systems so that we don't end up in a place where the losses or the liability is catastrophic. So completely agree with you.
Just, if I could just ask a follow-on question to your statement for both of you, right? So it certainly seems to make a lot of sense, right? That some guardrails, some protections need to be around the expansion and great use of this technology. Who would play that role?
Wait.
Separating into the Gen AI side, the Gen AI side is really, to me, I think when you, especially when you explain to people how Gen AI works and the fact that it hallucinates, and it hallucinates not because it's a bug, it's a feature. That's the way it simulates creativity, it simulates human intelligence. But it's a language model. It's trained on language. It's trained on recognizing and then outputting patterns in language based on whatever you input into it. Gen AI, again, is something that you could you could identify what the risks are as long as the human being that's using that tool understands what the risks and limitations are. That's the way you mitigate that risk. The other models are the ones that could really get you into trouble because they are black boxes, and you have deep neural networks that are identifying patterns and data that are imperceptible to human beings, and that's why it's so effective. In the United States, we have regulations for underwriting insurance or underwriting loans for lenders, and they're not allowed to use certain criteria to deny, to rate someone's insurance or to deny them a loan. These black boxes input into the model specific data related to race, creed, color, sex, national origin. The models are able to detect those types of classes from the data that you provide it. It could find it based on zip code. It could find it based on what would otherwise be innocuous, something that a human may not be able to perceive. So you have CEOs of maybe, of organizations that may not understand exactly why it works, but they may see a vendor show them a solution or even in-house that produces verifiably that are accurate to predict this type of thing. But because it's a black box, it's very difficult to really, without using some really heavy statistical approaches, to really discover, is this having a disparate impact on a certain race, creed, color, national origin? And so it's, there has to be two different approaches. I don't think you use the same approach for the generative AI side as you would for these other types of models. But to answer your question, I really think there are bodies out there that have certain standards. I think NIST has certain standards for AI models. I don't think we're at the point yet, though, where there truly is a universal standard or certification. So, I mean, I came to this conference really looking for folks like you that may be able to have the expertise to be able to analyze a certain solution that a vendor's proposing and be able to tell me objectively what are the types of questions I should ask this vendor, what sort of data should I ask about, what training data was used, what the results were, do the results is likely to be biased in a way that affects certain groups and could get us into trouble. So I think the first step now, because we don't have that universal standard, is really go out and rely on independent, objective sources to be able to help to clarify some of the results of these models. I think really that's what you have right now.
It's an interesting problem. And it seems that I'm interested in any other folks that have some thoughts on this, because it seems like the kinds of things, right, that could be using AI, the subject matter expertise, right, to evaluate the results that are coming out. Will this be something that ends up growing in the trade specialties, or like the the American College or College of Oncologists, or the you name it, where you have some specific subject matter expertise that would be able to recognize, right, this is a legitimate result, or this is not.
Yeah, definitely regulations and the standards, all these are important. I think they will evolve over time. I don't know how fast they will evolve, but from a governance, from a guardrails point of view, definitely we can look at financial services industry. I worked in financial services for more than 15 years, right? We have three lines of defense. If you take any bank, you have the first line of defense where the risk is measured by the developer itself, the model developer itself, right? Whether for the business purpose or risk management purpose or whatever it is. So that risk needs to be evaluated. Obviously, once you know the risk, then you know the magnitude of the risk. Based on that, you can put the controls, right? That's where the second line comes into play. And then you have the third line of defense, which is the audit. So some kind of model like that where the risk is managed by different teams within the organization, that will help for sure. To your other point, would we have some specialist occupation for this? I think we will very well. It is definitely a statistical problem, but also it's a computer science problem, right? Because we are using the hardware, the specialized hardware, we're using specialized algorithms. So those specialists who are who have the expertise to measure, manage the risk, put these guardrails, they should have this education, the statistical education, the computer science education. So it's very much a learning opportunity also, definitely.
Thank you. You bring up an excellent point regarding setting up the guardrails at the initiation of any type of AI, whether you are purchasing it as, from a vendor or you're developing your own. It is critical that we do that. In terms of, building in the guardrails, privacy, security, it is critical. So, for example, for Department of Veterans Affairs, we have the AI Governance Council, which again includes privacy. So we try to make sure that we are assessing those applications, whether they are internally developed or we are purchasing from a vendor, asking the key questions. Again, like you mentioned, what are the questions that we are going to ask regarding that application? Those are the key questions to make sure that there's no bias, that there's no issues with certain cultural groups. So those are the things that need to be built in. And you said, you need to have an area for doing all the audits and everything. We have those currently in organizations, but it's just not being utilized the way it needs to be. And AI being fairly new, yes, we are interjecting, privacy into those applications for AI. So I think it's critical to make sure that it's built in right at the initiation, not at the end piece. Because many times folks will come to you and say, oh, hurry up and go ahead and approve this because, we have to implement. The bottom line is the risk assessments were not done. So therefore, implementation would be out of the question unless, we've made sure. Again, the U.S. is, it's a large country. We do not have national or federal privacy law or AI law just like the EU does. EU has GDPR, which is a very strong privacy regulation. They just came up with the EU AI Act, which is, again, very critical to make sure that these new technologies and existing technologies, we are addressing the privacy of the data and the information and the applications that we are using.
Well, I would imagine it gets extra complicated, and I'm not a lawyer by any stretch, but I'm guessing you go across a state line and you encounter a different set of privacy standards and rules. So.
Absolutely, and can you imagine there are 52 states within the U.S. and if each, 50 states. So each state has their own privacy law. It would be a nightmare for anybody to do business and keep up with those rules.
Right.
Oh, no. How you doing? Dr. Fogel from Skillsoft. Just going back to the original question about how can it aid in the reorganization and standardization. So I just left the federal government. I was the Director of Learning Management Systems for Energy before I went to Skillsoft. And even as we've launched, the industry's first AI native skilling platform, the first thing that I say is when I listen to all these conversations going around the room is very few leaders in organizations even understand the maturity model of their organization when it comes to AI. Where are you at, right? So so I hear you say, well, everybody's in this rush. So are you in organizations, at the exploration phase where, oh, wow, we know what AI is, but we really don't know the capabilities? Are you in the experimentation phase? Are you really realization and transforming the organization where you can sit there and talk about the ROIs, right? There's governance that's built around it, and you can actually say, here's how we're employing AI ethically, and it's driving OKRs, right? Those objectives that lead to key results that we can now stand in front of our shareholders and say, here's the impact of AI on our bottom line. So now when you start talking about, at the VA and going back to the top two things for me when I was thinking about staying with the federal government and saw the push, the first two things that I thought about is when I started looking at 20, 30, 40% of workforces walking out the door, I just kind of wrote some notes. Number one, operational efficiency, right? Nobody's coming through the door. So we still have a job to do. We better figure out, right, how to still be operationally efficient. And then two, as we restructure our workforce, what are our workforce capabilities? So now how do we use this tool to do things like, for example, standardized workflows, our reporting, right? Because when you start to think about it, those are things that detract time, right? From as you start to consolidate functions across, I look at the VA and how many departments that you have that just make up the VA, or how about HHS, right? Where they got all these different organizations that make up that now they're under one leader. So now a tool like AI and applying and standardizing how they do things, even compliance, right? And then, okay, so now we start to look at our workforce restructuring. What does our skills taxonomy look like, right? What is job roles? Because now you have all these different people. Remember, these organizations have been operating, independently, and they've built their, silos of excellence over years. So now they're having to bring all these functions together under one, mayor, so to speak. So how do you now, continue? Because you're basically building the aircraft as you fly it. Nobody's stopping government, to say, let's reorganize and then pick back up. So to me, those are ways that, we start to figure out how to leverage this tool. But at the end of the day, leaders have to be honest about where the organization is from a maturity model. And there has to be some sort of assessment. Now, there are tools, companies out there that will come in and assess, so at least you understand from a baseline where we are, and now you have reasonable expectations, because I think that's the biggest thing. Everyone either overestimates their capabilities or underestimates their capabilities. And then there's two: we as an organization, and then on an individual level. So, that's all I got to kind of answer specifically the question that you asked.
Yeah, thank you. It's an interesting question on so many levels, right? You've got a workforce that's actually the folks out there doing the job day to day, but what about the decision makers? Are the decision makers at the more senior levels knowledgeable enough and equipped enough to make the decisions that have to be made on, do we use this, or how do we use this? Are we gonna violate things we haven't even thought about? So it's a really interesting time. I'm curious if in your organizations you've done anything with AI to mitigate the impacts of retirements, of the staff reductions in terms of loss of institutional knowledge. I thought there was an interesting comment made this morning by the gentleman from the Department of Energy, Craig, I don't remember his last name, but he mentioned that with AI, they were able to find that a problem that they were encountering had actually been encountered 10 years before at another location, and they had done a good analysis of what happened and the lessons learned, and him saying probably they would have never come across that information that proved to be very beneficial in dealing with the present day issue. So are there any cases where you find you're finding ways to tap into troves of institutional knowledge that are inaccessible by the average person with a computer or walking to the filing cabinet? Maybe not yet. Okay. Oh, Jason?
Oh, wait, so, go, Grace. Both? We're gonna go. Okay, when you're done.
Go.
You're close.
I'm just reminded, I worked for an aerospace company, L3 Harris, for a number of years, and we would have all these program reviews, very much like we had in the Navy when I was serving before that, where we would write up lessons learned. There was all of these documents we would collect over the years, much like our quality management systems. When we get audited, they're to a quality management system for AS9100, but ISO for everyone else in the world, where we say, this is how we do this, and oh crap, we did something that made it so these airplanes were less likely to have survivability, for example. We've learned this lesson and we build it into our quality systems. Now is an opportunity to understand how our organizations have been operating for decades, or some of our planes were 50 years old, we were still maintaining. And all of that data is still relevant. I'm reminded, I was recently with the military discussing 77 use cases at a hackathon. And all of these use cases around AI, people were like, we can't really do this. Task Force Lima, the government's Pentagon's task force that was tasked with investigating generative AI and learning how to deploy it, said, there's really two types of organizations, and we haven't done them both before: mode 1 and mode 2 thinking. So Gartner defines mode 1 and mode 2 thinking as, the things that we have to do to keep the lights on, the architecture of the building that we don't want you to touch, and mode 2, doing prototypes and doing hackathon events and doing new things to push the boundary and to build this tool set. And I found, kind of looking through all 77 use cases, that a lot of them were user experience. A lot of them were automation. A lot of them were AI assistants. A lot of them were just stochastic models, prediction, clustering, traditional machine learning. But at the end of the day, we really need a team, like from a maturity perspective. And this is also what Task Force Lima said when they closed down. Most of that information's disappeared from the Chief Digital and AI Office's website. So it isn't there anymore. Somebody's done some spring cleaning. But they said, hey, we have to have these two different groups, this new directorate, to be able to do all of these experimentations and to build the platform. So everything from the UX to the industry applications, the legacy SAP stuff, logistics, shipping, warehousing, all of these things that are becoming these shared services, right? Because we're not just talking about procurement shared services. We're not just talking about finance shared services. We're talking about warehouses and yard logistics, 3PL, all of these other things. At the end of the day, keeping in mind, we have a lot of this legacy data written up into all of these systems. Mining, repair data from 15 years ago is going to help us build better predictive models for maintenance. And I'm just kind of, where's the most value right now? Because there's a million places we could look.
Hi, Andrew Craig, General Motors, AI products, adoption, innovation. I work mostly on digital product side, so not specifically with vehicles, but to the question you had asked, some of the challenges that we encounter, AI has helped us pull from our troves of data that goes back. It's very deep, many silos, right? We are able to pick up on patterns that help us not have to rethink new solutions to solutions that work. So we do encounter that, but at the same time, we can encounter issues with that line of thinking because our products evolve faster. So whether it's digital products or our actual vehicles, I'll use a repair procedure, right? Sometimes we can learn from that by extracting something from an old database that saves us time and get a lot of good data on it. Maybe it's been solved 10 times before over the decades. But other times, as our product portfolio evolves from ICE vehicles to EVs to AVs, those insights become, I don't want to say irrelevant, but there's gaps in the learnings there, right? Because the world was different, whether it's repair procedure or our tech stack, and the AI is only as powerful as really the information we give it. So we talked a few times about wanting to put guardrails around our content or around where our AI can learn from. We run into this interesting conundrum where we want to be able to predict as much as possible about the quality and accuracy of AI outputs, right? Hallucination is a big concern, right? Especially if we're piloting in real audiences for real customers or dealers or stakeholders of any kind. And the challenge that a couple people spoke to already is we can only comfortably and with integrity move as fast as we can measure. And a lot of the solutions, whether they're on the actual automation side and workflows and in our plants or on digital products, we find that the tools can do more than they can fairly be interpreted on. So, and I feel like we're going to live in that space for the foreseeable future, whether it's months or years, I'm not sure, but it's a challenge that we will get the ask, hey, this capability is available. Let's make sure we have this because we want to move up that maturity scale and be an early adopter and be innovative, and it gives you competitive edge. But if we can only move as fast as we can measure, and we may be talking tens of thousands of executions a day, where we used to only be able to do a few hundred or 1,000, we're not really getting that ROI. So the things that we find most impressive and worth pursuing with AI are the things that have high ROI, high turnover, right? But we can't measure them in all the different ways that AI can be creative because our legacy tools, they aren't creative. They don't understand that a solution can be a good solution and look 5 different ways, because we only defined 3 paths. So yes, there's value to looking back, some gaps in it, but the bigger challenge for us, and I hear a lot of people talking about it, is that the tech moves way faster than the ability to measure it fairly. And if you put those people and those resources to measuring, your ROI lessens, right? So you have a gap here and you say, now we need a team of auditors to manually check this because there's not an automation that uses AI in the way the front end does. So it just, you can't keep moving where that ROI is. So there's a lot of discussion about AI replacing jobs, and I agree with something you said. It's created jobs in some space. It's changed jobs. AI aptitude is now part of some roles, but that big payoff of, and what seemed from the outset of this generative AI can do everything pretty much. It knows about everything. Yeah, if you set it free like that, and if you don't want to audit it, right, and if you trust it inherently, but most companies very quickly go, we don't trust it inherently. We have to move at the speed we're comfortable with, and the speed we can explain, and that's been the really challenging part for us. So.
Can I just add to that just real quick? You know, as we went through the military use cases too, we saw that they all were based on a persona, a person who's doing a task today. And we're saying, hey, it takes them 8 hours to do this task. These are the different things that are involved. And at the end of the day, you know, we think LLMs and we think chatbots, but it really is the whole UX. People can't you trust a generative AI, and they maybe never will, to generate a list of medications a patient is on, for example. I can't use an AI to look at 50 years of nuclear safety, and I never had an incident, and have learned what an incident looks like, right? There's a lot of things AI can never do. Charts, graphs, tables, decision tools, decision trees. We're part of almost all of these use cases. So when we talk about maturity, and I'm making a decision of stochastic or predictive forecasting, and it says these are the predictor variables that I used, and race isn't one of them, and class isn't one of them, you know, we know that I can use safely, you know, the stochastic models because I've got math, and I have traditional math backing things up in my predictor algorithm. It's up to us, but forgetting the fact that having a person in the loop and designing a use case based on that person and making them a superhuman and taking their task to 5 minutes instead of 8 hours, it should be the focus as these jobs evolve, and I think we'll learn what happens next.
I think it's interesting, especially from looking at the generative side. It seems like, you know, we have over the years, whether it's in the medical profession, engineers have become specialists. We have doctors who are extremely specialized in certain areas. And one of the things that seems to me, and I don't know, maybe I'm saying it wrong. I know I had a personal experience with this with my son. Took my son to a number of different specialists who were all eminent, you know, doctors in their field, but they were not able to identify what I was able to discover without putting my son's personal identifiable information into it. Now, this is it's a generative, a chat GBT, you know, model, and it was able to draw from domains outside of the specific domain that each of those doctors were trained on, and kind of give because of the way the data is vectorized inside, and it's able to pull ideas. And, you know, as far as, I think it does a brilliant job of simulating creativity, actually on a level that many humans don't have the ability to do anymore, because we are specialists. We're not generalists anymore. And it was able to actually pull the solution to my son's medical problem, which actually the result was the first doctor who met, the specialist who met with my son, misdiagnosed him, gave him a high level of a medication, continued to increase that level because my son wasn't seeing any results from that. Every other specialist I took him to that was related to the problem he was having were unable to identify the fact that the very medication that he was on from the first one was causing the problem. And again, it has to do with the concept of humans becoming more specialized. These models have the ability to bring in these concepts that are all connected in multi-dimensional space and pull ideas from different areas. And that also, though, is the challenge with regulating this in any way, because each domain has its own set of standards. You know, AI is going to cover almost every human activity that requires intelligence, repetitive tasks, and that spans, you know, huge amount of activities. So to regulate that in one specific way, I think is going to be extremely difficult.
So how do we scale up to you know, confront that challenge? Is anybody doing anything in their organizations to try and figure out how to get people educated? I mean, even in our own organization, right, at SAP, we have people like Jason who do lots and lots with AI. People like me, you know, not so much. And so I'm just curious if anybody's seeing any success in introducing sort of as a fundamental skill across the board at all levels to be able to think in ways about how could I use AI to assist me, and do I know enough to know, like, is my data good enough to trust it, right? That what I'm feeding it is reliable, is you know, right?
Thank you. I'll make it very brief. I think the administration or the heads of the company have to make it important. They have to make the initiative important for people to actually want to learn it. They have to make time for it. So in the school system, I work in the school system in Atlanta. I love to teach. I don't teach the children. I teach the adults how to use different tools. But if it's not important enough to the principal or to the heads of the company, the chief schools officer or the CEO, then the teachers aren't going to pay attention because they might not have the time to pay attention because the platform wasn't given to me to do so. And then once we put so much stuff on people, like I'm just keep speaking for the school, but like lesson plans and every moment of the day is regimented. They have a very strict schedule from the time that they leave their cars to the time that they go back to go home. If that time isn't given to them for me to get in, then it's like I can offer after school things, but if I'm so tired it's time for me to go home, then I'm not going to be interested in it. So I would love to get everyone to learn about AI, about Microsoft Teams, about all of these different things that I would like for them to use for productivity. And it's actually going to make it better. I stood up in front of them and was like, AI is going to help you with lesson plans. It's going to help you cut down that time so you can get back to enjoying some of your time at home. But if I don't even have time to learn it with you, then I'm not interested in it.
Nobody has time to save time. That's what
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a good point, right? But then when you start to look at productivity and even, you know, throughout the theme of this conference seems to be upskilling, right? And even what I don't hear a lot about is the other term, the other half of reskilling, right? So you may even have some employees who, as they are affected by AI, they've been highly productive employees. How do we reskill them to go into other areas? Because they've shown the aptitude, right? They've shown to sustain high performance. So the reskilling of those employees and introducing them, you know, to AI, even through the creative use of benchmarks, just to see. Once again, I always go back to figuring out where somebody is, because there has to be some baseline level of assessment before you apply pressure to that system, that person, that thing. Otherwise, that's how you end up breaking either things or people. You know, we start, like you said, as you're starting to teach kids, you have to figure out, like, where are we at? You know, even as a country, we have this whole wave of this whole AI move, and nobody stopped to say, well, damn, you know, where are we at as a country as we apply this thing called AI? You know, we jump out here and we think, you know, that we look at our competitors, right, that we say, like the Chinas, the Japans, the Koreas, all these other places that, you know, they have inherently been ahead of us when it comes to technology. And for whatever reason, You know, we don't look at it through that lens, but we get this tool and we throw it out there, and oftentimes it's wasted. You know, here we are, right? We got a Bugatti in our garage, and we're complaining because we can't get the right performance out of it. Well, it's not that the car isn't driving. It's the fact that we aren't equipped to drive it. So that's kind of where we have to, you know, really start to get back to the basics of figuring out how do we take this incrementally, right, and make sure that we're developing both at the same time.
And well, yeah, we've got a comment back here, but I think you make an interesting point too. When you look at society, right, and you look at the United States and you look at other countries, right, I think cultural factors play a big role here too, right? We fiercely independent Americans, right, don't like to be told what to do. So, I mean, I think that's got to be part of the equation, right? Is how do you get this out to in an American culture versus in maybe a more authoritarian culture or a more uniform culture than we have here?
I just heard the word incremental, right, in your movement. I think one of the areas that's going to continue to be challenging, and I've seen it in my work and in other spaces, AI is meant to revolutionize how we do work, right? And people have heard a version of that statement for a long time. To revolutionize a workforce or a school system, how you learn and just human nature to resist some things, right? It's much harder because you want kids to learn, you have to teach their parents to learn. You want the parents to learn, you have to appeal to a bunch of things. Like, is this person an intrinsic self-starter, or do we need to incentivize them to learn? Or are they close to retirement and they don't want to learn because this is, you know, it's not broken and they're doing well? You have to kind of manage all of that. And the unsexy thing about AI adoption is revolutionizing is difficult to do, and changing everything all at once to really grab and run with everything AI can do is messy, and you won't be able to make sense of all the black boxes you encounter along the way. So that less attractive part is to bite off what you can chew and understand, and prove out where you can interpret and where you can measure and where you can get ROI and go back and say, we didn't do this wide application as this platform can do, or that we thought we set out to, but we got immense ROI where we launched it, and we can measure everything where we launched it, and we're comfortable with the guardrails where we launched it. And that is not a popular opinion, especially in the last 2.5 years, right? You have executives that say, go now, like, we're embracing it, go figure it out. You're not able to deliver this overwhelming revolutionary change that fast because AI is learning faster than humans can. And we have a hard time with that. So just to your original question, where have we found some success, is when we're able to take a step back and keep that in mind. We've had a lot of success with products where we automate something that has a lot of knowns, has a lot of happy paths. So we take our highest candidates for automation, whether that's in a digital customer experience space or vehicle automation, and we say, we're going to put a fence around what we do here. We're going to measure the ROI, and non-popular opinion, we're going to audit everything that happens here with a human in the loop. Again, hurting your ROI, but those are where our success stories have come from early on. Eventually, we'd love to get to, we've revolutionized the space end to end, but the truth is we haven't done that in lots of spaces yet, but it's a step. Approach incrementally on the way to getting there.
All right, we're down to the last couple of minutes. Anybody want to make any bold predictions? No?
2 minutes. Oh, you?
Oh, bold predictions about where we're going.
Sure, or how we get there, or...
You know, I think we've learned this in Europe with sovereign data and what they've had to do to meet GDPR and some of the evolving AI regulations, right? We have to decentralize data sharing, and we have to figure out how data is going to be shared. I think that it's going to be the smart cities concept that we talked about a few years ago. You know, all of the emergency response in Los Angeles, for example. being able to coordinate when the California Emergency Utilities Association came to the table to fight, wildfire response. Southern California Edison, the local utility, and the 22 other utilities that were all trying to respond, especially around water, were unable to share map data because we had never made it a big deal to share data, and it seemed so hard and so crazy. Now, Department of Homeland Security is promulgating the National Information Exchange Model, which allows emergency response, police, cities, and governments to be able to exchange data. And as we create packages for doing data planning, scenario planning, and stuff on top of that, it really makes the smart city idea really happen when we can say, hey, you have access to this and this and this and this, but not this. And we use modern planning applications both for today's response on things like homelessness, and 8 years down the road, California, doing housing and rezoning that we can build more low-cost housing in the areas. I mean, I really think data sharing and smart cities are what we're going to see in the next year, other than robots. DARPA says robots. I agree with robots, too.
Just real quick, I think a big challenge over the next number of years is going to be access to high-quality data. I think as we have much more data being AI generated, I think it's diluting, the veracity of data, and so I'm curious to see what happens with that.
All right, folks. Well,
Sorry.
did you want to make a comment? Please.
Just want to comment. I would really like to see some of the governance frameworks, the ethical or the policy, the regulations, to really be able to catch up with the technology that's coming up every time, and to agencies to invest more in that department or that area for the governance. That way they will feel more, will have more trust in the system, and also to have an AI literacy department or something to always catch up.
All right. With that, we are out of time. Thank you, everyone. I've really enjoyed hearing your perspectives, and I hope that you've gotten something out of it as well. And I think you have a few more sessions before the end of the day. Enjoy it, and thanks for coming.